Hey everybody, it's part 2 of our planets painting project, okay? In part 1, we learned how to do some splatter painting to make outer space and the star field, and then we took some time and we made some texture paintings by painting with some watercolor or other paint and then putting our saran wrap on it to give it some texture. So if you don't have this stuff, then you need to find part 1 of the planet paintings and catch yourself up, okay? But if you do have all this stuff, this is the next part. So we let these dry overnight, okay? And if we pull away the paint, the plastic wrap, you can see some texture in there, okay? Maybe not as good on the green paper. That was kind of an experiment for me to try that, okay? We didn't see the texture as well there, okay? You can see the texture a little bit better, okay, in this orange and red one. You can see where this saran wrap added some texture to the paper, okay? It might be hard to see on the document camera, but I bet you can see yours at home a little bit better than I can, okay? And then we're gonna take that off, okay? You might go slow with this. Sometimes the paper tears, but usually it's okay. If it does tear, it did on one of my examples. It actually looked kind of cool and looked like it had like a cloud formation on the planet there, okay? And that one looks pretty cool too. All right, so this worked out okay. All right, so it has some cool texture in the background, some stuff that you just couldn't get probably by using a brush to do it that way. All right, so we've got all these different planet textures here. So what we're gonna do is find yourself some different sized circles, and then we're just gonna trace some circles and cut out these planets. And then I'll show you how to shade them so that they look like they have a light source from the sun or something like that. So go look for a bunch of different sized circles that you can trace with. Alright, cool. So I've got a roll of masking tape, plastic cup. It'll have 2 circles. The top part is bigger, the bottom part is smaller, okay? And then a plastic lid. So that'll be one way to do it. You could also use a plate if you really wanted it to be big. You could find a paper plate or just use any circle you want, okay? So let's see what we can do here. So what I'm going to do is look around on my picture to find a spot that I think looks cool, and then I'm going to use a pencil, okay, or in this case I'll use a pen so you can see it a little easier, okay, and I'm just going to trace the circle, okay? And if you want to use multiple pieces, that looks pretty cool there, okay? You can make planets, several planets out of one piece. Alright, so let's try this. I think that'll fit on there. See what this looks like after the shading. It might turn out okay. Okay, it didn't get as much texture on there as I wanted. This one has some really cool stuff on it, so we'll do one of these smaller ones, okay, and then we'll do a larger one here because this one looks cool. So maybe I'll try to get 3 out of there, and you could make as many planets as you want. So if you got carried away with this and you have like 7 or 8 different pieces of paper that you painted, okay, then you could have a ton of different planets, okay? And last time we looked at the planets so you could see what their different shapes and color schemes and stuff were, so you could try to match it up so that you had planets that were sort of like the real planets, but that's not the most important thing for this project. Just kind of trying this technique out. So I think that's plenty. I've got all kinds of planets here. So when you cut these out, then cut out just inside of your line so that the line doesn't end up as part of the planet, okay? So sometimes it's easier to do what we call a rough cut, okay? which is you're not trying to cut very accurately right now. You're just trying to get that piece out of there so that you can work on cutting it a little bit more precisely without all the paper getting in the way. So I'm going to cut just to the inside of the line that I traced. That way that line is not part of my planet. Okay? And even though these things look a little strange, once you get them turned into circles, they start to look a little bit more like planets right away. That looks pretty cool. Okay? There's almost like the red spot like Jupiter there. Okay? So I'm going to spend some time cutting out the rest of these. I don't think you guys want to watch that, so I'll press pause and I'll be back when I have a whole bunch of circles cut out for our planets. Alright, cool. So I cut out a whole bunch of planets here. I've got my whole collection of planets everywhere. I just have a piece of regular white paper. This can just be some scrap paper. When you do the shading for your planets, you might want to have that underneath, okay, your table or whatever surface you're working on, because you're going to be working off of the side of the paper. I practiced on this green one a little bit, and it looks a little bit better with the shading, but I still don't really like it that well, so we'll just take that one out of the mix for now. Let's try this on this smaller red one here, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to add some shading to one side of the planet, okay? So if a planet was in space, right, like the sun or whatever the star is close to it, would be shining light from one direction. So we would think about it here coming from maybe the right hand side of the page, okay? And so this half of the planet would be shadowed, okay? So if you want the sun to be like directly, okay, to the right, then shade this half of the planet, okay? If you want to think about it like a clock, right? So that's 12, and that's 3, and that's 9, okay? Then maybe just barely go to 12 o'clock, but be more like 11, whoops, 11 to 7 o'clock, right? Okay, and add that shading there. Now you can use a normal black crayon if you want to, but if you have some oil pastels, those might actually be even better, because we do want to do a little blending too. So I'm gonna shade this, okay, and make this nice and dark here, and then if you grab a paper towel, okay, you're going to try and pull the crayon from the outside towards the middle a little bit, okay? Now, that's not going to work very well with the crayon. It might just polish it up a little bit, so you might actually have to do the shading by making it a little bit lighter. So use your pressure, okay? So before I was putting a lot of pressure on that to make that black dark, but now I'm just putting a very light amount of pressure to shade this, okay? And so now it looks a little more three-dimensional, less like just a circle and more like a three-dimensional sphere, okay? And so it has a little bit of shading to it, okay? So that's one way to do it with the shading, okay? The other way is to use an oil pastel, okay? So let's figure out which way looks the most planet-like. I think I want to leave that little orange yellow spot alone, okay? So I'm going to start with my oil pastel, and I'm going to make it really dark here at the back edge, okay? So I'll spend some time shading and putting that oil pastel onto there, okay? Oil pastels can get kind of messy, so if you don't have the wrapper on your oil pastel, You might want to wrap a piece of paper around it or a piece of paper towel, and you can keep your hands a little cleaner. But I don't know. Sometimes getting messy is what art is about. So it's going to be dark right there, and I pushed really hard and made it dark. So let's try with the oil pastel and our paper towel now and see if we can't blend some of that out, okay, and do a little bit of shading. So we're going to pull this oil pastel out, and that's going to let us do our shading, okay, a little bit more. So that worked a little bit better than the crayon. We were able to pull that a little bit more. I still think I would like to have a little bit of lighter black, so I might still use the idea of pressure and make that a little bit lighter there, and then also combine it with the idea of blending and pull that around and use that paper towel to blend some of that shading into there. Okay, so that looks pretty cool, right? So now it's a little more shaded and it looks a little more three-dimensional. So I like the oil pastel. So you can repeat that step with all of your planets. So I'm going to do a few more, and then we'll put them onto our background and see what they look like when they're all done. Alright, so now I've got all these planets shaded and they look pretty cool, right? So we've got the light coming from this right hand side and the shading is on the left hand side. So you want to make sure that every one of your planets is facing the correct direction, because if you turn one around, okay, then it's going to look strange, right? It doesn't seem like it fits because now the light is not coming from the same direction and everything looks a little confusing. So make sure that they all face the same direction. You can overlap the planets on top of each other, then they'll kind of look like a little moon orbiting the planet, right? And if you wanted to get your paper out and make a really tiny version of this planet, you could make something like that. So let's get our black paper back out and let's see what we can do. We've got to move this out of the way. We don't have very much space. I have a pretty big piece of black paper. I have a 12 by 18 piece of paper. I don't know what you're going to have at home or how you're doing with this. I mean, if you don't have the black paper, you could always like make two of these and sandwich them together, right? And like put a string on it and then like hang it from your ceiling, and it could just be kind of hanging in your room, okay? And you could make a little mobile out of it where you hang everything on pieces and it just turns around in your room. So maybe you turn it into something besides just a artwork on a flat piece of paper. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to place these planets onto my spacescape. So if you have enough space, or if they're small enough, you know, you could place them in a certain order if you wanted them to kind of look like one of those graphics that show the different planets all in order, and you could line them up like that. That looks pretty cool actually, okay, where all the planets are lined up in order that way across there. You could move them around, okay, and do what we did before by having some orbiting other ones. So there's a lot of different ways that you could go about putting the planets together for your spacescape. So I'm going to let you kind of figure that out. It's not too complicated. You decide what you want, okay, and you decide if you're going to glue those down, how you're going to glue them, okay? So we're pretty close to the end, but I do want to show you something else because I can't remember where I saw this, but this is where I got the idea for this project. It was in a book or a magazine or something like that. And what they did was they took the extra pieces of paper that were left over from their cutting out of the planet, and they made like a landscape a foreground landscape. So they made it sort of like you were maybe on a alien planet or something as an astronaut, and you were taking a picture from the surface of the planet, and they put all the different pieces together. So depending on what you have left, you may have more or less of these scrap papers, but you can just cut them to form this idea of a landscape down across the bottom, okay? And then you can have your planets kind of floating above, so it's almost like those pictures that you've seen maybe from the moon, where you can see a little bit of the landscape of the moon in the foreground and then space in the background. So it's a pretty cool idea. I like it. So if you want to do something like that, it might actually be pretty cool, okay? The other thing that this project did was they actually kind of thought about it like science fiction, as if you could set up a colony in space and maybe make a little domed city where they built a dome to contain the oxygen or air if you were on a planet that didn't have that. So I'm going to show you how to do that because it's pretty cool, and then you can decide if you just want to have your planets in space, or if you want to glue them together and hang them from your ceiling, or if you want to make something like this landscape thing that I have here. Alright, so let's finish this up. So what I got is a circle. You may have one left over from one of your planets that you cut out. And what you want to do is find a place on your picture where you think a city, a little dome city, like a science fiction city, might be able to be built, okay? And then put a little white oil pastel, okay? Or white chalk if you don't have oil pastel. White crayon's probably not going to work very well for this. I use my finger to pull the white oil pastel down off of the paper and onto the black paper, and then it gives this kind of cool stencil effect where it looks like this little glass dome of this city there. And then if you want to take, you can draw like little skyscraper buildings in there, okay? And you can kind of create this illusion that there's a little city, okay, in space there, and you can kind of sharpen up your edge a little bit. But it's a kind of a cool effect, okay? Like there's a little domed city on some alien planet. If you really want to get into this and you want to put a little black oil pastel on the edges of your hills, you can do that as well. So if you want to keep the illusion going that the light is still coming from the right hand side, then put your shadows on the left hand side, just like you did with your planets, okay? And then you can use your finger to blend, okay? Or you can use your paper towel like we did before, okay? And blend some of that shadow in there, okay? And that gives you a little bit of three-dimensional effect for your background as well, okay? So you can add some shadowing to those hills, and that makes things look a little bit more three-dimensional too. So that's about it. If you think it's really cool and you want to sign your name to it, you probably should, okay? If you finish it up and you like what you've got, take a picture of it and send it to popart@popolatha.org, and we'll collect those and see if we can figure out some way to share those with more people. So, alright, I hope you guys had fun making outer space planets and sci-fi city. Alright, we'll talk to you guys later. See you next time. Bye-bye.